Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chat. Not as exactly honest, but hey, it's something. Okay, so now this episode was technically sort of voted on by my audience. Basically, I gave them options, and it just so happened this is how the stars aligned. So I think actually my latest podcasts have kind of sort of all been interconnected, like the more recent ones, really. Like, first we talk about the Fraud Squad, then we talk about the Red-Brown Alliance, then we talk about the Socialist Equality Party. You know, they're all sort of connected in a interconnected way, I guess. That of course they're connected in an interconnected way, duh. But, you know, you'll see where I mean, because all these sort of crowds kind of, like, interline with each other. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, your sort of average punditry news. Florida Democratic Congressman Alcee Hastings dies at 84. He was a civil rights advocate and longest-serving member of Florida's congressional delegation, died at the age of 84, losing to a bout with pancreatic cancer. Now, Alcee wasn't particularly... He wasn't necessarily hated, I would say, but he wasn't necessarily liked. He was well known for being plagued with scandals and a bunch of other things. I can't really speak positively or negatively regarding him. I should mention a little bit, like, of his philosophy. He was sort of always in that, like, centrist wing of the party. You know, he endorsed Lieberman in 2004. He endorsed Clinton in 2008. Was a Kamala Biden person in 2020. Was one of those, like, House members that, like, was, like, super into the idea of Tim Ryan replacing Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. The only thing I really have about Hastings is sort of, like, the optics regarding him. You see, he opens the door up, so now there are 6 vacancies in the House of Representatives. One is going to be filled on the 13th by Julia Letlow, who was the, like, it was originally supposed to be both Louisiana people were going to be sworn in, but, you know, they're still having that bout with Karen Carter-Peterson and Troy Carter. And they mentioned, like, the fact that the, you know, divide between the two parties in Congress is sort of starting to tighten. There wasn't a vast difference between the two parties to begin with, but, you know, it's getting steeper. Now, a decent number of them are slated to go to Democrats, but, you know, people are like, well, what will this mean for the short term? Well, I don't know. All I know is that this might mean that there might be another progressive pickup if we try hard enough. The next story is just sort of an interesting tidbit. Gun ownership among black Americans is soaring. Black people are buying guns at a high record rate, partially due to fear and anxiety, according to The Guardian. Black people owning guns has gone up 58.2%, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and a gun group's, like, Not Fucking Around coalition consists of armed social justice advocates who demand justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, visibly strapped with handguns. This is a very interesting study and sort of shows an indication that I knew was going to happen, that I predicted was going to happen, but, you know, it's still kind of like, oh, this is interesting. The thing I pointed out was that basically, due to all of this, like, racially charged stuff against African Americans in regards to, like, police brutality and such and other sort of things, basically this generation is going to sort of, my theory is basically that this generation that, like, I live in, or, like, the generation right above me, is going to breed a sort of new, like you picture, like, you know how in the 60s there was, like, the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, you know, like, the various other, like, African-American, like, advocates, like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. Basically, my theory is that my generation's sort of going to become, like, that, but tenfold. Some may be black nationalistic, and some might be more of, like, oh, we just believe that, African-Americans need to protect themselves. You know, like I said, a mix of both. You're going to get some people who are going to go, like, Nation of Islam-like, and are going to be like, hey, we need to, I I don't even know what Nation of Islam rhetoric I would use, but you know what I mean, like the super radical types. But then you're going to get people who are just simply like Black Panther Party members who, while radical, yes, are also not going to like push for black nationalism, or at least I don't think. It's not even necessarily like a good thing or a bad thing at this moment. Like, again, all we're seeing is that black people are buying guns more likely than not. And I mean, as of right now, that's not a bad thing. You know, I mean, America does have a Second Amendment. And, you know, if you want to take the route of like, oh, it's the Second Amendment, obviously, they have the right to do it. They have the right to buy a gun if they want. I'm, of course, an advocate of gun control and, you know, regulations, but I'm basically saying, like, when push comes to shove, what do you think is going to happen? That's what's going to happen. You're going to get African Americans who are going to buy guns at bulk and might be pushed to more radical ideologies than you might not like. And this all could have been avoided if they actually attempted to fix the issue. And we're even seeing this now with, like, the freaking, like, Chauvin trial. Derek Chauvin, the Derek Chauvin trial doesn't even trend on Twitter. It's considered the George Floyd trial. Literally, the hashtag is, like, George Floyd trial, and, like, a lot of the stuff that's being brought up are, like, basically trying to undermine, like, George Floyd or any of the other people who, like, are associated with him. Like, people are going to be pushed in this way, especially considering, like, they're even the most blatantly cut and dry stories regarding a bunch of these bad things are, like, treated as nothing. Breonna Taylor is the most cut and dry case. Like, police who didn't even alert to her that they were the police broke into her house, shot her, and she was like literally nothing in her record to indicate like, oh, she was a bad person, like, oh, she was a drug addict, or she was a blah blah blah. But conservatives are still trying to find a way to demonize her. They demonized a 13-year-old boy who was literally murdered in Trayvon Martin. There was the story of Ahmaud Arbery was another one that people were like, for some reason, trying to like fight against. Like, it is literally the most cut and dry, racially charged story of like a black guy literally walking down the street, and then like white supremacists go like, "Here we see a black guy, Negro." like it's the most cut and dry story, and there were people still trying to be like, "Oh well, Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, what did you expect was gonna happen, Ahmaud?" It's like, this is why. Like, legitimately, it's like the Joker from The Joker. You get what you fucking deserve, really. It's going to happen. Like, you're gonna get all these radical African Americans in the coming generations, and don't blame me when they get a little too radical for you. The left has been trying to propose solutions to these problems. The right doesn't want to address these problems, and the right is basically digging their own grave in regards to this. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, because it actually ties into that topic, sort of. New Mexico has ended qualified immunity. New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed a bill Wednesday ending qualified immunity for all government workers, including police. Good. End qualified immunity nationwide. This is a good idea. End it. Get rid of it. And this would sort of be like the compromise. I don't even know if this would be the compromise. This is a start, basically, to a full problem. Okay, there's not much I can say about that. She's trying to prevent a problem that will obviously be happening down the line. But it's probably a little too late for that now, even. Now let's go back to bad news. Amazon defeats the Alabama union effort. Workers at the Bessemer, Alabama warehouse voted 1,798 to 738 against the effort, labor officials said. That represented a majority of votes cast in the contest, which was seen as a key test for Amazon after global criticism of its treatment of workers during the pandemic. The union said that it would challenge the results. It accused Amazon of interfering with the right of the employees to vote in a free and fair election, including by lying to staff about the implications of the vote in mandatory meetings, and pushed the Postal Service to install a mailbox on company grounds in an effort to monitor the vote. And yeah, the fight isn't over, but effectively, it looks like this time the Amazon propaganda might have actually sort of helped. Like all the bot farms, all of the like propaganda that Amazon's millions of dollars can buy, or not even millions, billions of dollars can buy, have effectively sort of might have, like, probably did kill the union effort for the time being. Now, there have been some individuals on the left, Socialist Equality Party, that have basically been trying to undermine this as well. Basically saying that the real reason that the union was defeated was because somehow the union workers were like, oh, the real class strugglers, they saw through the Democrat Party lies and were trying to, like, stop it's basically like, I can't even explain it, because it's literally just like, what, you idiots, you literal fucking morons. They even tried to insinuate, like, oh, the Amazon trying to tell the people that the vote was on a different day, or that they instituted a mailbox in the household. That's not a bad thing. That was actually a good thing. Wouldn't that have increased the union votes? It's like, no, you fucking dipshits. You really think that a worker who goes to Amazon, sees a mailbox for the union, and then has the Amazon bosses pretty much be like, hey, yeah, you can use this mailbox to, like, vote for, you know, the union vote. I mean, I think that would be pretty interesting. I haven't seen you vote on this yet. Did you vote on your union yet? Oh, well, actually, no, I haven't. Oh, well, here's your union form right now. You can cast your ballot right now. Okay. You really think that in a situation sort of like that, they're gonna be like, oh, they're gonna vote for a union in front of the Amazon executives? No, you idiots, you morons. It's a dumb way to try and deflect. You know, like, we're leftier than thou. Even unions are too mainstream for us. And now, to piss off the SCP listeners even more so, let's talk about the last story of this episode. Justice Dems has officially launched their first primary challenge for the 2022 midterms. Odessa Kelly will challenge Jim Cooper, a Tennessee Democrat who is well known for being a pretty notable conservative in Tennessee's 5th Congressional District, in 2022. This is a sign to start looking at the 2022 House challengers more seriously. I'll be honest, I didn't look at the 2022 House challengers a lot more seriously previously. Like, I mean, yes, I knew there were people who were running, you know, what was his name? Damn it, I forgot his name. Jason Call. Jason Call is his name. I'm leaving that in because, you know, I don't know, it gives you a more authentic experience. But the fact that just as Democrats is starting to get on the train, it's starting to be like, alright, now it's time to start looking at these guys a bit more seriously. Not saying that I didn't, you know, not to saying that Jason Call, I was literally just, like, dismissed him, but basically I was just, like, basically going, like, let's wait a bit. I mean, I want to wait and see how things are going, because, I mean, a Senate challenge was a bit different than a House challenge. A lot of things can happen for a lowly member of the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, a senator, there's a whole lot more, like, gain and risk and blah, blah, blah. Alright, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. Ryan Knight. You may know him more as his, you know, @Proud Socialist, or previously, Proud Resistor. Ryan's been getting a sort of notoriety on Twitter. I would argue he's getting a bit more notable than you'd think. And the reason why is not really the best. Now, first of all, who is Ryan Knight? Well, that's where things are interesting. I don't really have a biography for him. You see, well, the rest of these guys that I talk about, they usually have, like, some sort of, like, wiki page that I can, like, sort of analyze and look over. You know, Jimmy Dore had, like, a Wikipedia page and a Rational Wiki page. And Cal Kalinske had, like, a Rational Wiki. And, you know, they have, like, either a full-on Wikipedia page or they have, like, a Rational Wiki page that sort of, like, gives somewhat of a explanation on who they are. But Ryan Knight, he kind of doesn't really have that, really. So what I can really go by is sort of like his basic online presence, as to my knowledge. Ryan Knight joined Twitter in July 2016. A very interesting time to join Twitter. Dems just nominated Hillary Clinton for president. And basically, he became like sort of a resistance lib. That was his basic thing. Like, we need to stop Donald Trump at all costs. His was literally proud resistor. Now, I would say, I guess his broad, like, political perspective was sort of like, a Sam Cedar-ish type. Was sort of like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I agree with you on these leftist principles, but, we kind of gotta, like, go with the Democratic Party and blah, blah, blah. Like, like a Cedarite type. I hate to dig up, like, old dead memes, but, Russiagator and blah, 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 all that jazz. The whole kit and caboodle, we all love this and blah, blah, blah. And basically, he sort of, like, made his crowd known, and it was sort of built up his online presence with sort of mostly in the resistor crowd. Then 2020 rolled around, and he was making his strides towards the sort of left, like, the compromise between the two things. He was always all on about, like, oh, well, ideologically, I do like Bernie a lot, but, we need to unite together as Democrats to take down Donald Trump. So, he jumped on the Warren train and became a huge Warren supporter, always sounding like having like, oh yeah, but Bernie's my second choice, In a hypothetical scenario, I would like to vote for Bernie and Warren. I'd like to have a Warren-Bernie unity ticket. Then, when Warren was basically not in the realm of actually getting towards the, when it was very clear that Warren wasn't going to win, he jumped ship and went to Bernie. Basically saying like, well, yeah, Bernie was always my second choice, and I mean, in a real life scenario, we gotta go with Bernie. But then he kind of sort of met hostility from both fronts. Some of the hardcore Bernie supporters were a bit hesitant to have a Warren Dem jump ship over to him, especially considering Bernie voters are a whole lot more radical than Warren voters. Warren voters were always known to be the more, like, not even social democratic, like, literally, like, progressive capitalist type, like, welfare capitalist, pretty much. She had to, like, sort of do meetings, basically saying, like, yo, I don't want to change that much, guys, I promise. To try and, like, make the moderates, like her more. The Warren Dems saw him as a betrayer who was going to Bernie, many of which even, like, contacting him personally, basically like, yo, dude, why are you endorsing Bernie now? Why don't you endorse, why are you staying? And he's literally just like, guys, Warren has no shot at this point. This is a sinking ship. Let's leave. And they're like, well, I mean, we like, basically like a cop out to try and, like, get him to try and stay on the Warren train a little bit longer. And then Ryan Knight was, like, sort of became like an avid Bernie supporter and all that jazz. Like, love the Bernie, love the squad, blah, blah, blah. All that jazz. But then he sort of started shifting again. You see, well, he was originally sort of the mindset of, like, well, yeah, we should support Bernie or Warren if they're the nominee, but also we should support Biden if he's the eventual nominee because we need to get rid of Donald Trump. Very similar to what happened in 2016. That was his view back then. Now, all of a sudden, he changed his mind. Now, he shifted to being like, I will never vote for Joe Biden, and now sort of started singing a new tune. Like saying like, oh, the corporatist shills, we're never going to join with them. The two-party system should be destroyed. And I mean, good. That part didn't seem to bother me that much. It's just like, well, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm down. Yeah, tear down the two-party system. And Ryan Knight even, like, started, like, promoting People's Party more and, like, started trying to get them to be on, like, the forefront of actually trying to get something done. And it's like, all right, let's see how this goes. But then, as a sort of tie into that crowd, he started sort of shifting away from the squad. Not too much at first, but he then started, like, shifting into that Jimmy Dore, Nico House type crowd. And the story starts falling apart from there. Joining in on, like, oh, we need to force the vote. And, like, basically, that was, like, one of the beginning parts. But then Ryan started shifting a bit again. Now all of a sudden, he was no longer he previously changed his ad during the saga. I think it was right around the time he became a Bernie supporter. He shifted, not even around that time. It was something along the lines. I don't know when. I don't remember when he shifted his ad from proud resistor to proud socialist. It was either when he started supporting Bernie or a little bit around that time period, and he sort of identified as a democratic socialist, or I guess sort of in a degree of social democracy. But basically he had shifted his position from being progressive capitalist to be more of a democratic socialist. But then over the course of a couple months, he shifted again to literally just go from oh, I'm a democratic socialist. Well, I mean, I sort of still agree on that sort of we need to start tweaking about certain aspects of the system, and then all of a sudden goes from that to I am now a super anti-capitalist. Capitalism is the sin of the nation and we must destroy it once and for all. And he did that without really doing anything. He goes from Warren Democrat, which is basically welfare capitalism, to stem social democracy, to being basically a full-blown communist. And he made some tweets basically trying to explain certain things, saying oh, this year was so year was so strange that I was so radicalized and I basically skipped DSA. Basically saying oh yeah, I skipped over DSA and just went straight to communism pretty much. And even in a hilarious tweet that many people have shared, Ryan Knight was saying where's the hammer and sickle emoji on my phone? And sort of just bro. And this is where things started to be okay, bro, this is getting ridiculous. And with this new found superiority complex in regards to his massive brains being oh, my brain's so super developed that I managed to skip DSA and become full-blown communist in a day. With this massive jump came a massive shift in regards to a lot of things. Now all of a sudden, from liking AOC to now basically he tweets about her every day pretty much, and literally the tweets are negative. Again, with that same Jimmy Dore Nico House crowd, the people who claim to be so far left that they've gone full circle and are starting to attack left-wing politicians again, especially laid out with a lot of huge hypocrisy on his level. First, we're going to start off with his huge political radicalization in the span of literally a couple months, pretty much. A couple of months to a year, pretty much. Like I said, went from Warren Dem to Democratic Socialist, well, not even Democratic Socialist, because he says, I skipped GSA, to full-blown communism, anti-capitalism. Basically, that from that. That is not at all the case. That's just not how it works. Especially on his age range. Ryan, for lack of a better assessment, because he hasn't published his birthday. I mean, I don't know. I would assume the reason why is pretty obvious, but I mean, whatever. But from how he looks, basically, he looks to be about in his mid to late 30s, early 40s, and all of a sudden he makes this radical shift in his political views. This is literally Dave Rubin all over again, except in a different direction. Dave Rubin went from being a TYT style progressive to being a full-blown conservative in the span of a year or two. I'll say it before and I'll say it again, you don't change your political views in that short time period. And Ryan's was even shorter. Dave Rubin had at least over 600 days. Ryan, the highest amount he can go is 365 days. But even then, I guarantee you, he didn't go 3, 2, 1. My views have changed. It's clearly not like that, especially just considering how our political views are ingrained in our heads. There have been studies that show when people attack your political views, people view it as an attack on them. Basically, it's attacking someone based on their religion. Basically, look at you they take it as a personal insult. Oh, you're insulting me? sounds like me. And people will naturally, like, forget it. Like, they'll either flat out reject your notions, or if they are okay with, like, accepting new information, they're not going to change their entire viewpoint in that span. You have to go bit by bit. Now, communists are eating up Ryan's transformation very fast because it apparently fits into, like, a Marxist narrative that when situations get tough, people will shift into Marxism, which not necessarily. I assume that when the situation had to be, like, really, really bad before people actually started shifting that much, like, I mean, there'd have to be, like, Great Depression 2.0 before a good majority of Americans start shifting towards communism. And even then, it doesn't even necessarily be the case. You'll get people who are sympathetic and maybe might shift their viewpoints slightly to be viewing communists or socialists more favorably, but their whole views are not going to change in that short period. But it fits in the narrative, like, oh, our beliefs are just so rational that if people read Marx or Lenin or whoever else, they'll just naturally shift to communism. This exact same thing is going to happen when I eventually read the Communist Manifesto or Das Kapital. I'm not going to read the books and become full-blown communist. I'm going to read the books, and then, depending on how I agree or disagree with some of the things that are said in the books, I might take those viewpoints, adapt them into my philosophy, take those parts to heart, then, maybe down the line, do more research in the topics, and then start shifting things. And I'm technically in an age range where it makes a lot more sense for my views to change in a radical period of time, because I'm way younger. My brain's not fully developed. Ryan's brain, I assume, is fully locked and loaded. Everything's locked in key, 25 and up. That's when your brain is fully developed. And I mean, I'm completely wrong. Ryan should be above the age of 25, so he should have his political views a lot more, like, stuck in stone, as opposed to me. And even me, it's a little harder to, like, budge me on certain things, because, like, I know what I know, and this is the information I have. I'm open to new information. That doesn't mean this one piece of information will change my entire political outlook. An example of a political YouTuber that has a more susceptible and believable change in politics is Hunter Avalon. He was an individual who started off as, like, a very conservative, like, person on YouTube, and, I mean, pretty reactionary, all things considered, but gradually, over his career, he started shifting bit by bit. He would get more information in regards to, like, LGBTQ issues, and then he'd change his mind, and then he'd get understanding of economics from left-wing YouTubers, and then he'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then, he made a gradual shift, and now he's sort of a lefty, I don't know. He's somewhat center-left, I would think. But that's basically where one of the major critiques of Ryan comes from. Like, he does come off as a grifter. Changes his mind very easily to fit a certain crowd. And it's the thing that's been called out by a lot of people for. People on the left, people who are Warren Dems, people who are, like, a part of the K-Hive. Everybody's calling him out on this because it reeks of BS. Especially considering he's now using this as a sort of, like, tool of, like, being like, oh, I'm leftier than now. I'm super, super smart, and, like, shifted my viewpoint to literally be, like, super, everybody points out this, like, it's a graph, right? Like, Warren Dem on one side, communism other side, and in between that, like, social democracy and democratic socialism, and Ryan Knight just goes, whoop, and he's sort of like, well, the DSA is a sheepdogger for the Democratic Party, so, I mean, I'm leftier than now because they supported Biden, which they didn't. And of course, if you want to do that kind of shtick, your prime target is going to be AOC. And as was stated during the Force the Vote controversy, which Ryan Knight was heavily a part of, he started going after AOC a whole lot more, to the point where he basically tweets only about her. All the while, he will also say this.
I do not believe that the main problem in this country is AOC, or any single member of Congress for that matter. I wholeheartedly believe that the main problem in this country and in this world is our decrepit capitalist and imperialist system that both corporate parties preserve and protect.
You say as you keep adding AOC and calling her a fraud and, basically insinuating that she's effectively the new Joe Crowley. Oh yeah, and every time he and all the other people who are in this sort of crowd always push back, And the AOC people will, like, push back at them. They will immediately turn back and say, oh, the AOC stands are pretty much a cult, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And it's funny enough, he said that whole spiel during an interview he was doing with a person who is a member of a political party that I covered in the last episode that has been accused of being basically a cult. And yet the AOC stands, we're the cult here. And also keeps pushing BS narratives. Like, he keeps pushing their article that has been debunked a million times over. You know, he keeps saying this exact quote. I want to apologize for AOC telling the truth about what she did, calling socialists who criticize Biden bad faith actors. She did not say that. She criticized bad faith actors. She did not say the words socialists are bad faith actors. She criticized bad faith actors. Now, the fact that you're getting so worked up about her calling out bad faith actors probably doesn't indicate anything about you, Ryan. No. Claimed Biden's cruelty at the border is better than Trump's. I mean, as I said over in the last video, it kinda sorta is in certain degrees, yes. Still bad, yes, which she said, but also that Trump's policies were way worse. Because, like, let's give the big example that Ryan Knight also tried to use. The kids separation policies. When AOC said that video, Ryan Knight basically was like, and posted a screen cap of a headline from a news source that had, like, the thing that was pretty much like, hey, the Biden is still technically continuing Trump border separation policies. Now, there's a reason why he didn't link it. And it's the same reason why Eric London didn't link the original AOC interview with DSA. Because if they see the actual article, they would know you're kind of full of crap, dude. Because when I looked at the original article, they point blank state, yes, the Biden policies are still bad, which, again, I have to reiterate, AOC said as well, and I have said, and every rational person has said, they are still bad, but they are better than Trump's. Here is the kid separation policy under both administrations. Trump. Okay, take kid, bye-bye. Never see parent again. Here's the kid separation policy between the Biden administration. Oh yes, you're their parent? Of course you stay with them. Oh wait, you're the grandparent? Or you're their older brother? Or you're the older sister? Or, old sibling? Hold on, let's separate you two for a bit. Let's try and verify if this is the case. And that process will take like a month or two. Still screws up, yes. If a kid's separated from their legal guardian for that long, that will definitely cause some mental drama. But it is, again, a better situation than under Donald Trump. And his last critique in this tweet was, sent money to Democrats who oppose Medicare for all. Yes, kinda cringe, but again, you need to understand how things work. She wants to help the Democrats keep a majority in the House of Representatives, and some of that entails helping vulnerable Democrats. You also kind of ignore the fact that she also raises money and funds more candidates to try and push for Medicare for all in safe districts and all these other things. She started her own group to fundraise for candidates in certain seats that would be for Medicare for all and stuff. Keep the not-so-good Dems in the House, but also try to expand the good members of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. But no, you can't say that because it doesn't fit in your narrative. And he literally says things that are literally just so blatantly you're clearly a liar and grifter. You're clearly. He says, you all owe Jimmy Dore an apology because he was right about AOC the whole time. And it's no, wrong. If you think Jimmy Dore is right about anything, you're an idiot. If you are a Jimmy Dore Nico House fan in 2021, you, for lack of a better term, are just completely stupid. Now, Ryan is actually trying to defend himself from being oh, I'm not a grifter. See, look. I only make $650 a month on Patreon. Now, what would be interesting enough is that he had to provide that screenshot because for some reason he doesn't publish those numbers publicly. Isn't the whole credence of like the progressive manifesto like, oh, we want like money out of politics and we want like complete transparency with the people on top. We want transparency. We want to know what their plan is. We want to know where their money's coming from. And yet, Ryan kind of hides the money. But I mean, maybe this was a thing on Patreon when he was a Warren Dem, so it makes sense. But it is like this weird level of hypocrisy. Like, oh, AOC's not the problem. Talks about AOC nonstop, like literally nonstop. And it's literally like, well, like he went on that spiel about like, oh, the capitalist two-party system and blah blah blah. Like that's what's ruining America. It's like, what are you doing about it, bro? Now, of course, you could argue, what am I doing? Well, I mean, personally, if you want to give me any credence of anything like that, I'm kind of trying to inform people more about like the history and stuff, and like trying to keep people a bit more informed of the modern like discourse and such. But in reality, it is mostly just me making videos online for entertainment and informational purposes. But the difference is, I'm not pretending to be this leftier than thou, high horse person who knows the true answer to everything. I'm a schmuck that happens to know a bit more about this subject than certain other people, who also happens to be good at video editing and like software and such. That's basically it. I'm not claiming to be anything more than what I am. Ryan attempted to do something, being on the People's Party board, but then that ship kind of sailed. Well, actually, it would be described as more as like the ship had a giant hole as it was still docked and people were like trying to get off. But like, basically that there was nothing that there's nothing else I could really see him doing, really. He interviewed Kashama Sawant once, and he interviewed a Democratic nominee for governor of Virginia. Where's his efforts? Where's his efforts? All I'm seeing him doing is trying to take down the things we already have. And in the same BS way, with no actual substance, that effectively serves to basically what he's doing is making AOC almost immune to criticism at this point. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if every single time AOC gets criticized at this time is mostly BS or exaggerations or other things, what will happen when eventually AOC does make a big mistake and these same people call her out? They have now emboldened the idea that all the criticisms levied against AOC are basically BS nothing. Especially considering the criticisms that they levy, even the ones that they would technically sort of have a point on, they don't have a point on. Again, I always love the idea, like, I want to see one of these anti-AOC, like, shitheads, like, anybody, really, go into Congress, do literally all the things that they're going to say that they're going to do. They're going to attempt to force a vote on Medicare for all, reject and openly don't support Nancy Pelosi for speaker, go up to every member of Congress and be like, screw you, you suck, screw you, you suck, use all your time on the congressional microphone, basically bad-mouthing the entirety of the members of Congress, and then see how much you get done in your one term, because that's what you're going to get in one term. Good luck with that. You can still critique and fight against the establishment while also trying to legislate like you are. AOC's gotten a lot of things done in the span of her first term, and even then, she's still technically considered one of the least effective quote-unquote members of Congress. And even that criticism, like, they're like, see, this didn't work. It's literally like, oh my goodness. Do you really think that if AOC, like, pushed for more radical legislation and was more hardline, that would work? The reason why even members of the squad, like, were doing better than her was because AOC was mostly focused on, like, the big name legislation, like the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, like, big, broad plans, whereas people like Rashida Tlaib were from, like, while of course they were still focused on the big, broad plans, they also tried to, like, get, like, bread and butter issues done, or bread and roses issues, Now, I should also address one elephant in the room. I mean, I don't really have to address it, but it's a thing that is worth pointing out, I guess. Ryan, I did at one point briefly follow me, and then unfollowed me. I don't know why he unfollowed me, but he did. There's not really anything else on that regard. I don't even know if Ryan and I even interacted with my posts, really. Which is a whole side rant. There are a lot of people who just follow me who don't really add anything. But that's 100% beside the point. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on Ryan Knight. I mean, I'm not really a fan, all things considered. I mean, that's the least I could say, really. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.